time has come for America to hear the truth.
April 4th, 2021 on the great WGOL in Russellville, Alabama, and sometime next week on WHIV in New Orleans, Louisiana. Today we are talking to labor lawyer Brandon Magner about what the Amazon union election would have looked like had the PRO Act been law. We'll be taking calls and more on today's Valley Labor Report. So our first announcement, just a reminder, the North Alabama DSA is holding a necessities drive this Saturday and every Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the IBEW Local 558 Union Hall on Clinton Avenue, right across from Campus 805 and Yellowhammer Brewing in Huntsville. If you're in the area, you want to drop off some clothes, some non-perishable food items, blankets, PPE, then swing by the IBEW Union Hall right across from Yellowhammer and Campus 805 from 3 to 5 p.m. on Clinton Avenue this Saturday and every Saturday. You can follow DSA North Alabama on Twitter for more information. If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments throughout the week. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website, thevalleylaborreport.org, where not only can you buy these fantastic union-made hats right here. They are made by a Unite Here local. They're fantastic. They're my favorite hat. Wear it all the time, even though it's a bit cheesy to wear your own merch. $35 with free shipping, and you get stickers, 2 stickers for free if you get the hat, and you can also buy the stickers by themselves if you just want a couple stickers. They're like $5, pretty cheap if you don't want to. If you don't want to drop the $35 on the hat, we've got the stickers.
Union-made stickers.
Union-made stickers. All of our merch is union-made. And if you appreciate our work and just want to send us a couple dollars a month, that is very helpful. You can do that on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. You notice that we came in live a bit early today. I just talked to the producer at the studio, because our commercials didn't play this morning. At the last Saturday of every month, we run commercial free, and it looks like he forgot to put them back in this morning. But I think we're going to be able to. I think we're going to be able to get him back on. I just texted him. He said he can do that remotely. So we should still be able to get the commercials. We'll see.
So we should get a. We should get a refund for this week, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
Good money for this damn show.
But we've got Brandon Magner on the line. He is a labor lawyer. He is the author of the blog Labor Law Light on Substack. That's spelled Lite, Labor Law Light on Substack. Brandon, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Jacob. David?
Yep. So like I said, Brandon has a really good blog. Everybody should subscribe. It's on Substack.com. The title is Labor Law Light. He's been doing a lot of analysis on the PRO Act. It's been the topic of a lot of conversation online, and so folks should definitely check it out. And he wrote a really good article about what the Amazon union election would have looked like had the PRO Act been law. So that's the big thing that we wanted to talk to him about today. But before we do that, could you just give us a refresher on what exactly the PRO Act does?
Sure. So the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, is sort of the latest attempt, but the most comprehensive ever, in my opinion, attempts at labor law reform from a pro-union perspective. Labor law reform has been attempted many times before, trying to repeal right to work in the 1960s, trying to enforce a ban on permanent striker replacements in the 90s, card check in the 2000s. But the PRO Act's the first real, in my opinion, comprehensive attempt at changing the law to actually benefit workers, since it's sort of the answer to Taft-Hartley, in my opinion, from the 40s. The PRO Act, it changes, and what I mean by comprehensive is it doesn't just attempt to fix one little hole like right to work or card check. It attacks the deficiencies in being able to organize. It attacks the deficiencies in being able to, once you have a union, being able to secure second, third, fourth contracts through giving more economic weapons to unions to use in negotiations. It cracks down on a lot of unfair economic weapons that employers have been able to use over the years. And it beefs up the remedies that the NLRB can use in cracking down on employers. And also it expands the amount of employees that could come under coverage to the NLRA through changing the employee versus independent contractor test. So in my opinion, that attacks basically everything that labor law has been missing over the last several decades, and which unions need. And I think unions need every single piece of that to really be able to comprehensively change the way that the labor movement organizes and builds power in this country.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's not only kind of the most comprehensive pro-worker bill, it's really the first pro-worker change to labor law, really since the NLRA, right? Every other change to labor law has been something that the employers have been pushing, bosses have been pushing, that has hurt workers' ability to organize and to fight for better wages and working conditions on the job, at least nationally, right?
Correct. The only real comprehensive changes to labor law have been, you mentioned the NLRA itself, but the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947 and the Landrum-Griffin Act in 1959 are the only real major changes that have ever been made to the NLRA, and those were seen as universally anti-union, pro-employer changes to the law. And just to tie this into the current political landscape, every attempt that I spoke about of trying to change the law in a pro-worker perspective all died in the Senate because of the filibuster. All of those votes, all of those laws at one time had 50 or more senators that were on the record saying they supported it, and all of them died because you couldn't reach that 60 number. So I know that's we're not really talking about necessarily the politics today, but if you want to get the PRO Act passed, you got to get rid of the filibuster.
Yeah, well, the politics are important because we're going to rely on legislators and senators to enact that. And I think it's important to point out when you use the word attack early on, it's not really an attack. It's basically equalizing the playing field, because the playing field has been slanted so far towards corporations for the past 80 years that we've been fighting with both hands tied behind our back.
No, absolutely. it's not it doesn't automatically enroll everybody in America in a union overnight. Maybe that'd be a little unfair. I don't know. Like, I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world, but it does give you a chance. It gives you a chance to actually enforce your rights without the employer basically being able to deny them at will.
Yeah.
And you've seen, and I don't want to say that doesn't mean unions haven't been able to succeed ever under the NLRA, but it's incredibly difficult. And as we're going to talk about with Amazon, it basically requires like the whole country to come together to get behind you and to even have a chance, it feels like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's talk about Amazon then. Amazon, everybody knows, we've been following it pretty closely. We've talked to workers. We've talked to RWDSU members outside of Amazon. We've talked to staff organizers, elected officials in the union here on this show. And, they are organizing in a situation without the PRO Act. Talk to us about some of the issues that they've been having with labor law in this country and how it would have been different under the PRO Act.
Sure. So the Amazon union election, I think anybody who follows these elections and knows anything about labor law is not surprised at all about 99% of what's happened. It's really the blueprint employer playbook that's been run for about 40 years. It's use captive audience meetings overwhelmingly. That's legal under the law currently. And it's used in studies show it's used in over 90% of union elections. And it has been found as to be the most effective weapon that the employer can use against unions, because unions have no equal right to, under labor law, that was a former ruling. They have no equal right to speak to employees in sort of a massed assembly like that. Meanwhile, the employer can do it every day, 4 hours a day, whenever they want, and just propagandize their message. And that's incredibly effective to people who are on the fence or who just aren't getting a lot of information from the union. And, respectfully, if you work 12 hours a day in an Amazon plant, maybe you don't want to go home and think about work more. So being able to talk to them at work is incredibly effective. But it's also just, it's being able to, as we saw, the stage was really set with the actual pre-election hearings, where Amazon was able to either force the union into a choice of either we're going to stall before we even get to an election, because we're going to try and inflate this bargaining unit that you've petitioned for as much as possible. We're going to hold hearings for weeks, months on end about what each of these job descriptions are, whether they fit, how they fit in with the other jobs that you've petitioned for. And it would have taken a long time. So they forced the union into a Hobson's choice of, okay, do we inflate the unit and have to organize far more workers than we expected, or do we wait months on end, let all the momentum of this union organizing drive die, and let them be able to do captive audience meetings for that entire time? So I guess I'll tie that into how the PRO Act would change things as one.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. We'll talk about that here on David. If you could click MTJ Start Next and start. We're going to go right to a break, and we'll pick that up on the other side of the break, and then we should be good as far as the
All workers deserve
as far as everything. So, be right back.
Plan that enables them to retire with dignity. All workers deserve to have a say about the terms and conditions of their employment, not just the bosses. With the machinist unions over 600,000 members having our back, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama has been serving workers' interests for over 20 years. Our members have the best health insurance in the area with zero deductible plans. We set the bar for pay in the area with over $40 an hour rates, consistently averaging the highest non-college degree jobs in North Alabama with some of the best retirement plans in the industry. We can do the same for you. Together, we remain united, raising our voices to ensure justice on the job and service in the community. The Machinist Union is a true Southern union founded in Atlanta in 1888. We have been serving members' needs for 132 years. The longevity of our union proves our dedication and loyalty to the working class. The Machinist Union isn't just for machinists. We represent workers in government, healthcare, auto workers, aerospace workers, transportation workers, the defense industry, and woodworking. Our members even build the iconic Harley-Davidson motorcycles. If you're ready to get serious about better benefits and wages, if you want to have a voice in your workplace with over 600,000 members to back you up, call or email us today at 256-286-3704 or organize at iamaw44.org.
Here in Huntsville, federal employees are an invaluable part of the nation's defense, offering unmatched expertise in engineering and technology and as stewards of taxpayer dollars. What we ask for in return is to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE Local 1858, is a union of working people looking out for each other, making sure that we're treated right. To inquire about joining or to learn more, call 256-876-4880. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time, but the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maple, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtandj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Hey, you listen to conservative talk radio all week. Why don't you try something different for a change? The Majority Report with Sam Cedar is a 5-time award-winning daily left-wing political talk show. We go live every weekday at 11 a.m. Central Time on our YouTube channel. You can find it by searching for The Majority Report. We talk about the news, we take libertarian callers, we have debates, we interview guests on topics ranging from the post-Civil War Reconstruction era, child poverty, capitalism, the intellectual dark web, and more. And that's all just within the last month. If you want to hear what smart, progressive political talk that is occasionally amusing sounds like, then you need to tune in. And you're always welcome to call in if you want to hear the correct opinion on any given topic. I will give it to you. Tune into The Majority Report at 11 a.m. Central Time on YouTube or later wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's go! Hey! Walking through a wasteland, unlooking skies, in a land built upon a foundation of lies. All
right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we've got Brandon Magner, author of Labor Law Light on Substack.com. Thank you very much, Brandon, for sticking with us through these technical difficulties. We appreciate it. We were talking about how these anti-union meetings are really effective and really, you didn't mention this, but they're you mentioned that they're unfair, but really they're, in my view, coercive, by their very nature of being on the clock, being given by people who have a supervisory role. But I've talked to conservatives about the PRO Act and how this will make these mandatory anti-union meetings illegal, and they say that's anti-free speech. That's basically the kind of that's cancel culture kind of thing. I think that's silly. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'd respond by first saying that was once the NLRB's position, is that unfair labor practice. Captive audience meetings were an unfair labor practice because they were coercive under Section 8A1 of the NLRA. That got overturned because of I think that the NLRB eventually under the Eisenhower administration bought into that free speech argument. And it became such a mainstay in labor organizing drives that I think no one's really tried to go back and uproot it. But that's not a radical position at all, and that's not at all a guaranteed position, or that's not at all a guaranteed outcome. That it is I don't know, maybe they're making it first violates the Constitution or something. But really, you can regulate all sorts of things that employers do at the workplace. Otherwise, OSHA is unconstitutional. But there's no guarantee that, or really, the labor law should not allow employers to take all their employees into a room and force them to listen to any message for 4 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. I think you're right that's a asymmetry under the law, and I think the PRO Act recognizes that. and makes these captive audience meetings an unfair labor practice, as they once were. And that's important because, one, that takes away the employer's main weapon that they use in an organizing drive to get out their message. But two, the PRO Act changes the calculus for how it arrives at when an employer should have to issue a bargaining order for committing violations of labor law during an organizing drive, by saying that if you commit any unfair labor practice or you otherwise interfere in an election, too much that takes away employees' freedom of choice during the election, you have to bargain with the union, as long as the union was able to demonstrate that at some point before the election, they had majority support within the proposed bargaining unit.
Right.
And that's extremely important, because that puts the employer in a very strict, confined area of what they're allowed to do and say during an election. And a lot of their current methods are all unfair labor practices. So if you screw up and you try to coerce your employees, then you may have just lost the entire thing. And then now there's a union you have to bargain with. So I think that radically shifts how they approach organizing drives. And not only that, but they aren't allowed under the PRO Act. They wouldn't be allowed under the PRO Act to participate in the pre-election hearings that we saw that were so pivotal with Amazon. It takes away employers' standing, their right to participate in these hearings.
Well, so
from
on
the
that,
employer.
on that, circling back to the unfair labor practices during an election resulting in mandatory bargaining with the union, like the union getting in. This is something that I had actually misunderstood for a long time. I thought that there was automatic card check in the PRO Act. That is not actually the case. And there was a lot of concern about, feigned concern, I guess I should say, about the preservation of the secret ballot, and that card check does away because it doesn't necessitate a secret ballot. That's bad. It's bad for democracy. It's bad. Whatever, they can be intimidated, and the idea that the union RWDSU can intimidate people more than Amazon is just it's silly, and I think people need to recognize that. But the PRO Act doesn't institute card check. It actually, more than this clause of the PRO Act, more than anything else and more than anything certainly proposed by Republicans, preserves the dignity of the secret ballot, because it says, like you said, if they show that there was at one point a majority support for the union and there were done unfair labor practices that could have coerced people into voting against the union, then they get the union, because there was that majority support previously. And so it really preserves the process of the secret ballot and says, look, you've got a right through this process to an election and to a secret ballot. And if the employer violates that right, then we will believe the first thing that you said, which is that you want a union.
Right. I think you just summed it up very well. And I think that was probably put in there to take away a lot of employers' eventual arguments against card check or being part of the PRO Act or something. It's funny because a lot of them still think, I think from that erroneous reading of the law, I think they still think that there's card check, but you haven't seen the sort of overwhelming. I mean, when I remember the late 2000s when card check was a thing and you had ads being run all the time and just like, oh, they're trying to take away your right to vote, basically. And I think, who knows, maybe that's because of voting rights are so prominent right now in elsewhere in the political landscape, that maybe they wanted to keep this feeling of this election machinery still in place in the NLRB, because card check would have really done away a lot of that.
Right.
But I think you're right that it creates a good political argument for the PRO Act that it keeps this secret ballot provision in place. But it says that as long that you get to still have the secret ballot as long as the employer doesn't blatantly violate the law in some way.
Right.
And then because at that point they kind of forfeit their right to have this process, because it's only there in place assuming that there's two good faith parties here, trying to pitch their message to the employees. But if one's going outside the law to do it, then why should they have the equal say in the arena? Right.
Yeah. And that's, it's a really good, I think I even personally like this better than card check, because this says, well, I mean, look, it says, look, there's a secret ballot, and if you because the problem that I have with the way that the NLRB elections are done is that they allow the employer to gerrymander the unit. They allow the employer to commit ULPs as a practice, and why can they violate the law just as a general practice? The answer to that is because the penalties for it are so inconsequential that it can just become a cost of doing business, and so then they win the election by violating the law, and then the union's options are, okay, do we put the workers through another election, or do we just give up? And by saying, okay, the penalty for violating the law is that these workers who have already expressed a desire to have a union, they have a union. That's a real penalty, and that's going to set the stage in my mind for a genuinely fair secret ballot election. And I don't know. I think that sounds good.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I'll say one thing and then I'll digress, because I'm a big proponent of card check for the simple fact that without card check, it makes it gives the appearance that the union is a third party. And the at issue is if you have card check, and if you have a majority of employees in that workplace sign a card, then it's over. In other words, pitting a union against an employer and bringing in a government agency is absolute. I can't say what I want to say, but it's absolute crap.
Right.
Because the employees are the union, and once they've signed the cards, then it should be an accepted thing. Private ballot. I mean, this whole idea of a private ballot is horse crap. If the employees decide they want a union, then they're a union. Simple as that. But I'm not arguing against the PRO Act. I'm just saying. To make this sound like this is a great win, if we do get the PRO Act, I still think it's terrible. It's just barely equaling the playing field. Barely.
No, and I think that if you take from the union perspective, I think card check is the natural conclusion that you come to when it comes to the employer shouldn't be allowed to have any say, right? It should be the employee's choice. They come to the employer as a union and they're saying, okay, well, now bargain with us. That's probably true. I think, though, the reason why you have this system, this election machinery still being used in the PRO Act is because the NLRA for 85 years has been using the rhetoric of industrial democracy. There's been a lot of good research and scholarship that shows that the NLRA has always been tied to, when people try to defend it, or when they pushed it through Congress originally, it was to create a system of political democracy ported over into the workplace. And so I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think that when you're working within those confines, the secret ballot makes sense rhetorically.
Yeah, we'll pick that up on the other side. Stay tuned. This is the Valley Labor Report.
Huntsville's #1 news, talk, and weather station. WVNN Athens. WVNN FM Trinity. A Cumulus station. It's 10 o'clock.
From ABC News, I'm Brian Clark. Almost 1.6 million air travelers moved through TSA checkpoints on Friday. It's the busiest air travel day of the pandemic. And travel was the theme of Friday's announcement from CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
Fully vaccinated grandparents can fly to visit their healthy grandkids without getting a COVID-19 test or self-quarantining, provided they follow the other recommended prevention measures while traveling.
She said domestic travel is safe for people who are 2 weeks past their final vaccine dose, but that non-essential travel is still not recommended because of high case numbers. Former CDC Director Dr. Thomas Frieden tells ABC.
You have to continue to mask up, and you don't want to have a family traveling with some people vaccinated, some people unvaccinated, and going on travel, because we know that we're heading into the fourth surge.
Major League Baseball announced Friday it will take this summer's All-Star game out of Atlanta because of the state's new voting law. ABC's Elwin Lopez says
Georgia's governor blasting the decision, labeling it a knee-jerk reaction.
Major League Baseball has caved to the cancel culture. Now that they're coming after your baseball game, They're going to come after your business. They're going to come after your way of life. But I will tell you, I'm not backing down.
Critics call it a means to suppress historically disenfranchised voters in urban and suburban counties, while proponents argue that it makes the state's elections more secure by, for example, adding new ID requirements for absentee ballots.
Governor Kemp will speak with reporters today. U.S. Capitol Police are in mourning after Officer William Evans was killed in a confrontation Friday with a man who authorities say rammed barriers outside and lunged at officers with a knife. His childhood friend, Jason LaForest, says
it is, incredibly sad and just surreal, to know that Billy died, serving our country, doing something that he loved so much.
You're listening to ABC News.
It's such a beautiful night. Look at the stars.
They're amazing. Did you know 20% of stars have planets orbiting them capable of sustaining life?
How did you know that? You must spend a ton of time reading.
Not at all. I use Blinkist.
Blinkist?
Yeah, it's an app that takes key insights from over 4,000 nonfiction bestsellers and gathers them into 15-minute blinks for you to read or listen to. With Blinkist, you can learn the main points of an entire book in just 15 minutes, as opposed to days or weeks.
What kind of books?
Nonfiction books in over 27 categories, from personal development to history, management, investing, philosophy, and more. Books like A Beautiful Mind, The 4-Hour Workweek, Freakonomics, and Sapiens. Blinkist makes it easy to learn about pretty much anything.
Like the stars?
Even the stars.
Right now, radio listeners get 25% off, plus 1 free week when you go to Blinkist.com/grow. To get this special offer, go to Blinkist.com/grow. That's BLINKIST.com/GROW.
WVNN Afternoons with Yeffy. Weekdays 2 till 5 p.m.
Hey, y'all. Are you tired of hearing that the South is just a bunch of racist rednecks? Or tune in to Dixieland of the Proletariat podcast. We talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Join Nelson, Senior Telecommunications Director Tommy, Comrade Kate, former pig farmer Tyler, and Brother William, wherever you stream your podcast. And good Lord willing, the creek don't rise. We'll see y'all next time. It's Dixieland of the Proletariat, y'all.
Charge upon the land, a population burned up, bled dry. The marginalized multiply and unite to fight. You make the world.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we've got Brandon Magner, a labor lawyer, author of Labor Law Light on Substack. And you were saying that, at least rhetorically, the secret ballot it seems to be good, even if card check would be the optimal thing. And I would at least agree with you there, for sure. So the circling back to the captive audience meeting, somebody asked this in our YouTube chat, and I wonder how you feel about it. The right of response instead of outright banning captive audience meetings, because the issue again with captive audience meetings is not only that they are they're coercive. But also that they're unfair, meaning that the union does not have the union doesn't have that kind of unfettered access to the workers that the employer does, and so they get all this time to every single worker in the plant as a condition of employment. Conservatives hate that in some states. Paying representation fees can be a condition of employment, but hours and hours of your time can be taken as a condition of your employment during these union campaigns by the boss to fill your head with anti-union propaganda. How do you feel about a right of response instead of a ban on captive audience meetings? Brandon?
We lost him.
Uh-oh. We lost him? Okay.
Sorry.
The meeting ended?
The meeting ended.
Okay.
And we got dead airspace.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. So we've had an issue. We've had an issue with Zoom because our account. We got to apparently we lost our pro account for a bit. And can you get the meeting back up?
No, it's not even letting me go add a fucking pro account now.
Okay. Well, Brandon, if you could give us a call at 1-866-494-9866, that would be great. So that we can continue the conversation. Sorry about that, folks. We have gotten today has just been a day. I don't know. So I didn't tell y'all about this before, but on the way in, my engine basically went kaput, and so I had to luckily today was a day that I came in early, and so we were still able to get in without any issues with that, but
with everything else, it's been an absolute struggle this morning, including no commercials, including the Zoom account being canceled. It's crazy. So yeah, and Jacob's trying to get him to call in, and maybe if we can get him on the telephone line, then we'll continue the conversation. Otherwise, we'll be more than happy to take calls from callers and go from there. I mean, one thing that we definitely wanted to talk about this morning was the mine workers going on strike 2 days ago, and the great support that they've been getting and the solidarity that they've shown on their picket line so far, which is early in the game. But man, it was super strong whenever I was down there yesterday. It was beautiful to see. And there's 1,100 of them down in Brookwood, Alabama. They're fighting for a fair contract. And when we say a fair contract, they gave up $8 an hour. I think it was 4 years ago when the company went into bankruptcy, mainly because of mismanaged venture capitalism. And now they're asking them for another $7 an hour to give up. I mean, you're talking about a $15 an hour pay cut over the past few years is insanity, absolute insanity. I don't know anybody or their family could withstand that kind of a pay cut, and not only the pay cut, but they're also asking them to pay more for their health insurance now, on top of a $15 an hour pay cut, and the health insurance is going to be worse. It's a terrible situation. So we all need to come together in this state and support those workers in every way that we can possible. Yesterday where they were asking for burn barrels because it's cold at night and as much water as people can give them. So if you can make your way down there with some cases of water, I'm sure they'd be very appreciative of that. We get him back on the line?
Yep, we got him back on the line. I think I got him back on the air. Brandon, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry.
Hey, no, that was our fault. That was our fault. So the backstory there is that we did a series on Bolivia that we needed translation for, and we had the Adelante, Alabama Workers Center down in Birmingham do some translation for us, and so we had to get a Zoom translation account, and we had some issues with that. We didn't want to pay like a whole year of translation services for one. We just wanted 1 month, and so and so we had some issues, and apparently we were using a free account there. So, but we've got you back. We've got you on the phone now. And so the question was, how do you feel about a right of response, going back to the PRO Act? How do you feel about a right of response instead of a ban on captive audience meetings? Is that something in the cards?
So, now that was attempted by the NLRB too back in the 40s and 50s when they dropped the approach to banning captive audience meetings at all. So that kind of shows you right there that the original ask was to ban them in general, and then they tried to make a accommodation by saying equal access. But I'm just skeptical that if you give the employer footing at all in this arena, I think that it just kind of amplifies the problem that's already inherent in the workplace, which is they have more power. Sure, if you give the union an equal right to have their own meetings, it's one thing, but the employer still is able to hold over the employee's head. Hey, I control your paycheck. I control your work schedule. I control your entire ability to work here, really. So it is powerful, I think, to give the union a equal footing. And, I much prefer that over the current situation where the union has no equal footing and the employer's allowed to do it at will. But I think that when you still mass employees into a room in the workplace, you're basically ratifying the current power structure that's already in place. And it's in whether the employer is still allowed to say the same things or not. There's still the implicit understanding that he has the power here. And so I think not allowing him to even open the forum at all is more powerful in my opinion.
Right. I agree with that. I think that the coercive nature of the boss in the workplace is really, even if you give equal time, it's still not the same. It's still not the same. So I agree. I think a ban is better. Some other things that would be changed, and I'm wondering if the mailbox that was put on Amazon's property that both Amazon and the Postal Service are saying that they didn't put up. I'm wondering, and that the NLRB told Amazon, no, you cannot put a mailbox on your property for this election.
Correct.
I think that's pretty clearly an unfair labor practice. That act alone would institute under the provisions that we were talking about earlier, because the bargaining unit has showed majority support already. They would have won a union because of that unfair labor practice, right?
That's exactly right. And that's a great example because, first of all, I think it's an unfair labor practice, or it's at least interference with the election under current law. So I think if the union can show at all that Amazon had any access to this this ballot box, the union's gonna have a real good argument to set aside this election if they lose it. Mm-hmm. But that's the trap that we fall into, right? And what would be changed under the PRO Act is under current law, you can set aside an election and then have another go, spend a bunch of money to try and do this again. The employer can commit unfair labor practice to get the result they want and trap you in this litigation loop. And maybe one day you can get a bargaining order. But under current law, it's really hard to get that passed in the reviewing federal circuit courts because after 3 or 4 years of litigation, you've got the unit with a 30, 40, 50% turnover. And the employer, the courts have been, in the past at least, they've said that when there's that much turnover, that's no longer freedom of choice for the employees. You have to give them another election. So it's this kind of laughable idea of that you're protecting the employees by basically forcing them into this endless nightmare of trying to enforce their rights. But the PRO Act, like you said, would it'd be a very hard, strict standard of, you interfered, that shows not good faith, therefore bargain with the union, as long as they're able to show majority support beforehand.
Right.
And so it completely changes the calculus for the employer, where on the one hand, under current law, they can commit these unfair labor practices because the remedies are very weak. But under the PRO Act, it's going to be, if I commit any unfair labor practices, bam, I've got the union. So what's my incentive to commit the unfair labor practice?
That's exactly right. How else do you think the Amazon union election would have changed if the PRO Act had been law?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, so the pre-election process would have been completely different. The union would have almost certainly gotten its proposed unit for the election. It would have been the 1,500 that they originally wanted without the employer there to gerrymander the unit, because he has no standing now under the PRO Act to these processes. He's not there to quadruple the voter list. So they would have had, they felt very confident about the unit that they petitioned for. So then, and then couple that with the Amazon really not having any incentive to commit unfair labor practices, then you've got a real good shot at the election. And of course, the PRO Act speeds up the processes themselves, so there's less time for the employer to commit to do any sort of negative campaigning. And under the PRO Act, there's also there's the remedies, which are really important in terms of actual fines themselves. The current law does not allow the NLRB to order any sort of punitive damages at all for basically violating the law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk to us. That is, that's just one more thing that I didn't realize the NLRB has no authority to issue punitive measures like in the form of fines.
No, zero. All they can do is they can restore if you fired a worker for a blatantly unlawful reason, aka he was organizing a union. The most that they can do, that the Supreme Court has allowed them to do in interpreting the NLRA, is to restore him into the workplace with back pay. Yeah. And maybe that has some symbolic power of you tried to fire him and he's back.
Right.
But the actual monetary calculation is fire the worker, because what's the worst that's going to happen? I pay him back pay. deducted under the law. Also forces the worker to have deducted from any remedial fines the amount that he made during the time, the years that it takes for the NLRB to reinstate him. Any money that he made during that time at a new employer is deducted from his back pay. So the offending employer under the NLRA gets a discount for their unlawfulness.
Right, and there was a study or a story that just came out last week, a couple weeks ago, where somebody was reinstated, but from a firing for organizing from 2017, 4 years ago.
That's normal.
Yeah.
I mean, this type of of litigation gets drawn out for years, and it's in the employer's best interest to do everything they can. And the worst that happens is they have to put up a little flyer on their bulletin boards and say, "We violated the law. We're sorry. It won't happen again."
Right.
I mean, that's justice in America in the workplace.
So what are the new penalties that under the PRO Act, once it gets passed, what are the penalties that can be levied on employers?
So any unfair labor practice committed by an employer, each violation itself it's a penalty of up to $50,000. And then for repeat offenders, which is defined as any employer who's been found to have committed unfair labor practice within the last 5 years, it can be up to $100,000. And when you go back and when you go tally up unfair labor practice committed by employers in organizing, drive, and NLRB decisions, they can, each time that a supervisor says, if they surveil an employee, that's unlawful. If they say, "Oh, I've heard the plant might close," that's unlawful. You find that this sort of this culture that's given around, that's built up around, just violate the law. What's the worst that can happen? That would rack up for employers millions and millions of dollars very quickly. And, for an Amazon, that's not a huge deal, but for for an auto parts store that has 15 workers and, tries to bust the union, that could be a huge penalty that really forces them to change their approach to, or really, my perhaps rosy predictions are that for any medium or smaller sized employer, you really are just not going to try and bust the union under the current methods, because it's going to be extremely expensive, and it is not that hard for the NLRB to prove these things.
Yeah,
the problem is it's hard. The problem has always been it's hard for the NLRB to actually do anything about it. It's not been that it's hard to prove violations under law. It's that the violations don't amount to much.
Yeah, and in most cases, you'll find that we constantly refuse to file ULPs because we know it's a losing cause. I mean, I was in an organizing drive a couple of years ago where the company came in and said, "We'll give you 100% employer paid health care if the union don't go through." The problem is, we can file a ULP and run another election, but then who's the bad guy in that scenario? Because all of a sudden we're forcing the employer not to pay for your health care anymore, and it puts everyone at a disadvantage, and advantages the person that's actually breaking the law.
And every time you tell that story, I want to make sure everybody remembers that after the union threat was done, after the campaign was over, they lost their 100% employer-sponsored
Yeah, well, we're in the process of reorganizing them once again, but, as all good things, anytime the employer makes you a promise, they're going to go back on it eventually, and they did. So,
that's a perfect description of why under the law, why people always ask, why is the employer forbidden from making promises, benefits during an election? Because don't we want the employees to have better benefits? Isn't that the point? The union's there; they got the benefits whether whether they won the election or not. It's because exactly like that, and there's Supreme Court case law that shows this, that the employer can just withdraw that the second they want once the union's defeated.
Yep.
That's a great illustration of it.
And we can't run in another election for another year. So the employees are sitting there on their hands going, "Well, we made a mistake." Well, but we told you were going to make a mistake. Right. But now our hands are tied.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so the penalties. This is a good place for you to tell that story that your latest that you came out after you did the article about what the Amazon election would have looked like under the PRO Act. You've pumped out another article on Substack on Labor Law Light. You should go follow Brandon Magner on Labor Law Light on Substack.com. 7.5 million reasons to support the PRO Act. Tell us about that.
So, in addition to the fines that we were talking about for unfair labor practices, the Act will also install a fine process for just not even recognizing that the NLRB gave you an order at all. There is currently no, accruing fine process for just saying, oh, I'm going to ignore what the NLRB told me to do. And that's illustrated by a New Jersey contractor that it was a classic salting situation where an organizer in one of the building trade unions up there in New Jersey, he applied, and the employer sniffed him out and said, "Oh, he's with the union," and then he denied him work, created a new application process on the fly explicitly for him, and denied him work. And that is, of course, that's a violation of the law, Section 883 of the NLRA for anti-union discrimination. And the problem was the NLRB easily proved this. The employer didn't even bother hiring a lawyer, didn't show up to any hearings, never answered the complaint that was issued against them, anything, just pretended like this was all this happening, and that this was never happening. He ignored everything. The NLRB, they got the violations. They proved it at the board. Then they went to the circuit court for enforcement, and they upheld it, said, yep, he violated the law. Doesn't matter they didn't hire a lawyer. That's his decision. The problem after that was when the NLRB tried to enforce its order and say, okay, you got to at least give this guy, or they got to hire him with back pay because he would have been hired otherwise. They continued to ignore the process, never answered anything. Wow. NLRB went to federal district court to try and subpoena his records and enforce the circuit court order, which sounds silly, but this is how long. And at this point, it's already been over 2 years since the NLRB said, you have to hire this guy back. And the employer's just done nothing about it. They've completely just ignored the whole process. And just now, last month, they finally got a contempt order, contempt of court, saying you're just flouting the entire legal process at this point. And it's a $250 a day fine. He's built up. It's been a month and a half at this point. So he has I calculated he has a $10,000 bill at this point, not counting whatever he owes the worker, Right. And it's almost poetic because under the PRO Act, for ignoring an enforced board order, it's $10,000 a day. Mm-hmm. So it very quickly, instead of just saying, I got 3 years to not even answer this, screw this, and that's important because the employer is making the calculation that, well, it'll cost me less money to continue being an explicitly anti-union shop and not hire anybody during this time, because I've got that's basically 3 years the government's giving me to just right. Ignore them, because only then will they go get their contempt order. The PRO Act says, okay, it's $10,000 a day from the day the NLRB makes its decision, not when they go to circuit court, not when they go to district court, not when they get their contempt order. Once the NLRB hands down that decision, and unless you appeal it yourself to the circuit court, you've got to start paying that. You've got to abide by that order, otherwise it's $10,000 a day. So, and I got the 7.5 million number because I calculated from the time of when that board order issued in February 2019, he would have racked up, as of last week, he would have had a $7.5 million bill for $10,000 a day that he's ignored the NLRB.
Right.
And so that just shows you the difference. $7.5 million under the PRO Act, if you just completely flouted the law like this, versus $10,000.
I mean, that's really there was no even, attempt to defend himself or say what I'm doing is right. Like he just straight up ignored the legal process. And that is how lopsided our labor law is, that you can just, as a boss, you can just ignore it completely without consequences for 2 whole years. I mean, imagine being a worker. Like what? I don't even know what the analogy would be. What a worker could do that would be even comparable to that. I can't even think of one. It's unfathomable.
Yeah. Well, just under the legal processes itself, imagine ignoring the Department of Justice or something.
Yeah.
Imagine just saying, I'm not going to show up for that hearing.
Yeah.
Imagine you'd be in jail. You'd be in jail within a week.
Getting a speeding ticket. I mean, imagine just like not paying it for years. Like there, you're going to like, it's going to rack up.
And
oh, you're going to get a bench warrant, what you're going to get.
Yeah.
A bench warrant, and they're going to come to your house under threat of your life and take you to prison.
For a speeding ticket. For a speeding ticket. Much less, flagrantly violating legal orders by the United States federal government for 2 whole years. Just for a speeding ticket, think about what would happen if you just ignored it. It's absurd.
Yeah, and if I can real quick, I know that a lot of people, there's always a debate on the left over whether does organizing create law, does law create organizing, whatever. Like, is there any point to amending the law if the workers themselves aren't rising up, et cetera? I think, there's some credibility to that, but at the same time, it's like I think people who say that law doesn't matter that much have to realize that we don't really have a law right now.
Right.
Like, it's like you can just, as that case demonstrates, if an employer wants to just ignore it for 3 years, he basically can. And so I think there needs to be at least some sort of legal amendment process that allows workers to vindicate basic, just very simple rights at this point.
Yeah, I'm as far to the left as anybody when it comes to this, as far as not really caring about relying on the law, but even I realize that law and organizing are symbiotic, and in order to unless no one is accountable to the law, and at that point, then fine, it's each man for himself. But so long as there's somebody that's willing to take me to jail for coming on somebody else's property and organizing in their workforce, then you have to recognize that we have to have an equal playing field.
Absolutely, because workers recognize. Workers know. I mean, they pay attention to the law. They recognize when the employer can do that to the organizer, and that the union has no even comparable method of enforcing law upon the employer. That hurts your organizing.
Right. That's exactly. I've talked to so many people here in Alabama about hey, you should do a union about that when they complain about work, and they're like, oh well, I'll get fired. Like the value of
lopsided.
That's the value to an employer, that the popular perception is that getting a union in my workplace is so hard. I'll be homeless if I try to do that. If you could send this, even just the messaging value of passing the PRO Act and being able to point to that and say, look, we've got real mechanisms here. If your boss tries to fire you, they're going to get hit, and they're going to get hit hard. That's valuable.
Yeah, we got about a minute left, Jacob.
Yeah, we got about a minute left. Brandon, I'll let you. I'll let you have the final word. Have you got any closing thoughts for us? And thank you for your time.
Just that you guys have been obviously on the ground, seeing everything happening. Me up here in the Midwest have been just trying to follow as much as I can the Amazon drive, and I just with all that we've talked about this last hour or so about how the law is just completely slanted against workers. I'm just so in awe of the fact that at the biggest, most powerful company in the world in the Deep South, that there's a union out there willing to take on that task, and that this is kind of showing the light. If they win, that doesn't mean we don't need the PRO Act. That just means that they surpassed all odds to get their justice, and we need the PRO Act because not everyone is going to draw the national attention of the media like an Amazon drive. This is happening every day in America. And the PRO Act is something that we need to actually create, like like Dave was saying, at least an equal playing field.
Yep. Brandon, that's exactly right. Thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed it. Folks, make sure that you are subscribed to him on Substack.com. That is Labor Law Light, Lite, on Substack.com. Brandon Magner is his name. You can follow him on Twitter at the same, at Brandon Magner. This is the Valley Labor Report. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about the mine workers' strike on the other side. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison. This is News Talk 770 AM, 92.5 FM, WVNN. News starts now.
We expect to hear from Georgia Governor Brian Kemp shortly, a day after Major League Baseball's decision in response to Georgia's more restrictive new voting law to move baseball's All-Star game out of the state. ABC's Steve Osunsami is in Atlanta.
Georgia's governor says this state will not be bullied, and there are dozens of state houses across the country considering similar measures. This action certainly puts them all on notice.
Flags on Capitol Hill and at the White House flying at half-staff to honor Capitol Police Officer William Evans. He died while on duty after investigators say a lone driver crashed through a barrier and attacked him and another officer at the U.S. Capitol. The suspect, identified as Noah Green, shot dead by Capitol Police. A new pandemic record for air travel. More than 1.5 million people passed through TSA checkpoints on Friday. This time last year, that number was 200,000. The new record coming on the same day the CDC announced it's safe for fully vaccinated individuals to travel. Dave Packer, ABC News.
WVNN.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time, but the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maple, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtandj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by listeners like you. If you value the work that we are doing, injecting a different perspective into talk radio, and you have the means, consider signing up for a monthly donation on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Again, that's patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report to support our work and keep us on the air.
Lonely dead, stuck, bleeding pig. Lonely ditch, I choose to dead.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. We just finished talking to Brandon Magner. You can find him on Substack.com. He is the author of Labor Law Light. Just really quick before we start talking about the mine workers, if you like the show, if you support our work, as you can imagine, there are not businesses do not line up to support Union Talk Radio. So if you want to support us, the best way to do so is by donating a couple dollars a month on patreon.com. That will really help us to stay on the air. You can also buy a hat, thevalleylaborreport.org. I really like our hats. Like I'm not just blowing smoke up my bum. I think they look really nice. I think they're made really nice. They are union made. They're for $35. That includes shipping. Thevalleylaborreport.org. We've also got stickers and bumper stickers. You can get those. They're like $5 and $6. Thevalleylaborreport.org. Patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Or if you are a member of a union in the area or a progressive nonprofit or even a business, and you want to advertise on the show, let us know. You can message the pages on Facebook or Twitter, anything like that, and we'll get you we'll get you set up. We'll get you squared away. So I just wanted to make that PSA really quick.
And it's important to point out because a lot of people are under this misconception that the radio station, out of the benevolence of their heart, is allowing us to come on and do this. And some of my members even thought, well, he's getting paid by the radio station. Mm-hmm. Look, folks, we pay for this airtime. And it is not cheap. If you can imagine what a commercial costs, an hour and a half of airtime on a radio station is not cheap. There's a lot of supporters, the Alabama AFL-CIO, Tucker's, get it out.
What?
Maple Tuckers and Jacobs.
Maple Tucker and Jacobs
has been a strong supporter of the iron workers. But without all of these people,
it wouldn't be
advertising.
Possible.
Then we're because basically our time is volunteered. We're given 5 to 10 hours a week dedicated to this show for free.
Yeah, we may be almost break even at this point. almost break even, I would say. We're still in the red a little bit, and obviously because the time is volunteer, our time is valuable. We're doing this labor, and so consider supporting the show if you think what we're doing is valuable. And our supporters on Patreon now are contributing as much as our largest advertiser monthly,
which is good.
That's fantastic. That really helps us. And so the more that we have that, the less we've got to rely on ads, and the more sustainable the show becomes, and stuff like that.
Well, and the more that we can get out and do things like today. You're going down south, and where we went to where we went to the RWDSU, all of that stuff costs money.
Right.
Bringing those stories is not cheap.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't have any wealthy benefactors.
So, David, the mine workers. We've got some coal miners down in Alabama, in Brookwood, Alabama. 1,100 of them are on strike right now. So the backstory, as I understand it, David, you can fill it in if I'm missing anything. But they have. In 2016, Warrior Met Coal was nearing bankruptcy.
They were in bankruptcy.
They were in bankruptcy.
Yes.
They were in bankruptcy, and to save them, the workers sacrificed $8 an hour
on top of pensions for new hires, on top of numerous other concessions.
Yes. A myriad of concessions were made by the workers in 2016, and including an $8 an hour pay cut. That's not. I mean, $8 an hour pay cut. That is huge. That is an enormous. That's like. And that's just salary. That's not the accumulation of all the benefits. That's an $8 an hour straight off of your salary, on top of every other concession that they made. And now
$1,500 a month. I mean, really,
that's
almost
a lot.
$1,500 a month. It's a house payment in a large city. It's probably 2 house payments in Brookwood.
That's a lot of money. And now the company is asking for more after they have come out of bankruptcy, after they're becoming more and more profitable.
After the managers are getting, I think it was $30,000 bonuses last quarter.
$30,000 bonuses last quarter.
Yeah.
In a quarter, $30,000 bonuses for managers. That's some BS. That's nonsense. So now the company is asking for another $7 an hour pay cut. They're asking for more concessions on pensions, on health care, on all this other stuff, while they're giving their managers $30,000 bonuses in one quarter. So the coal miners are going on strike. 1,100 of them have walked off the job. And David, you went down there yesterday. Lord willing, I'm going down there today. If my car, I haven't heard back from the auto shop, so I don't know what's going to happen to that. I don't know what's going to happen with that, and I don't know how. Hopefully the bill's not too much, but hopefully I'll be able to go down there this afternoon. David went down there yesterday. Talk to us about what it was like, David, on the picket lines.
It was exactly what you would think that it was like during the 1930s. Everything that you read from the 1930s, the only difference is they didn't, I say they didn't hold a gun on us. He had a gun on his side, so I guess he could have pulled it out at any time. But there's state troopers down there at all the picket sites. They were very, when I pulled up, I got there early, but the workers have been out there all night. The workers are saying, well, they haven't been that bad. They said they're on our side. And I'm like, yeah, well, wait till something happens. I promise you that'll change. Well, within 30 minutes of me arriving, a gigantic 18-wheeler pulls up with this, I don't know what this is, some kind of earth-moving equipment, but it was humongous. And of course, we're walking a picket line. The point of the picket line is to impede the flow of traffic in and out to put the company at a standstill. Well, the state trooper did not like that, and he got out of the car screaming, hollering, threatening. And we're like, we're getting out of the way. We can walk. We don't have to run to get out of the way. But Yeah, I mean they're going to do everything they can to protect capital, to protect this business, and screw the workers over. But I will say, workers were solid, man. I talked to probably 30 workers, and I didn't hear one with any wavering in their voice. They are out there to get what they deserve. So yeah, it's good. It's good. There was a lot of young ones out there. It's like Jack Jacobs, one of the lawyers that helps us. He mentioned last night that he was real proud to see a lot of the young workers, and I talked to one of those young workers that had been there roughly 4 years, and he was standing strong. He was one of the ones that walked up to me. Numerous thanked me for coming down, and and that really speaks to the labor movement in general. All I'd done was get up in the morning and drive down to walk the picket line with them, and every one of them is over thanking me, shaking my hand. It really speaks to the solidarity, and it humbled me, because I'm like, look, guys, I'm just down here to help y'all however I can. Y'all are the ones going without food right now. However we can help you, we're going to help you. And to that point, we should be helping them. Everybody in this community should be helping them, because by them getting a fair contract, it further bolsters our community. When there's more money in the community, because it's the same with my company. When the company saves money, it's going to Denver. My company, that money's going to Denver. It's not helping anybody in our state. When they have to pay more in wages and benefits, that money, if you want to go by trickle-down economics, that money is trickling down to the car dealerships, to Lynn Layton Chevrolet over here, to the restaurant industry. The waiters and the waitresses are going to be getting some of that money. It gets spent in the community. So we should be doing everything we can to ensure these people are making and I don't care what you think a fair wage is. If somebody's got more money than you do, be happy, because you're going to get it. They are going to spend it in the community, and it's going to increase your wages. If not exactly through their spending, it creates a vacuum because the other employers have to start paying a little bit higher to keep good employees, and it goes back and forth. It's a free market. So anytime that an employer raises their wages, all the employees at the other places are going to start saying, I'm going over there to go to work. And it forces these employers to bring up the wages. And that money gets spent in the community. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and, coal miners are like, they're the quintessential thing that any union drive that I have ever come across, the boss is always like, oh, we don't need a union, but those coal miners need a union, but we don't need a union. Okay, well, so here's some coal miners, and they're on strike. So it's time to support them. Yeah, support them. So here's a challenge. I bet money that there are Amazon supervisors, and that there have been union busting folks at the Animal Legal Defense Fund that tried to bust their union. Folks at No Evil Foods, I think they actually dropped coal miners in their anti-union propaganda. Folks at the ACLU in Kansas trying to bust their union. All these supposedly progressive bosses, a boss is a boss is a boss, incidentally. But all these supposedly progressive anti-union bosses just in their workforce. Here we've got coal miners in the 21st century being asked to take, since 2016, a $15 an hour pay cut. A $15 an hour pay cut since 2016.
For a company, this business is booming.
Yeah. They're out on the picket line right now. Support them. Support them. Amazon is not, Bessemer is not but 40 minutes away. I want to see every single supervisor from Amazon out there supporting them. I want to see them donating to the strike fund. I want to see Bezos out on the picket line with them.
Yeah, well, one of the most beautiful things I seen last night after I got home was one of the workers from Amazon going over to Brookwood and sharing signs with the striking mine workers. So the mine worker was carrying the Amazon sign.
Right.
She, being the Amazon worker, was carrying the mine worker sign. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see the labor movement coming together in the state of Alabama and standing up for what we deserve. It really
well, you said
solidified
one Amazon
the state of the labor movement in Alabama in the last year.
Yeah, well, you said one Amazon worker, but I don't know. I saw
sure
that one. I saw that one, but I saw another picture that Applebaum, the international president of the RWDSU, put out. He put out that another picture with a whole crowd of Amazon workers that had gone on the picket line to support them, and I think that's just beautiful. And that's the kind of energy that we need going forward to build a strong labor movement here in Alabama. Is that we need to support one another in all the ways that we can. I mean, this is a big deal. This is something that folks in the labor movement need to. We need to be there for these workers. And like I said, if my car is if I'm able, I'm going to be down there this afternoon, and we're actually partnering with Working People, going to be having conversations with some of these coal miners and putting them out on the Working People feed as well as our own feeds. So I'm really excited about that. But I'm so, when I see folks standing up for themselves, not taking the boss's beatings, and understanding and knowing and fighting for what they're worth, or for closer to what they're worth. Of course, what these coal miners are worth is the full value of what they produce, and they don't get that, and they're not going to get that even if they get everything that they ask for in these contract negotiations, because there are still CEOs and there are still going to be bosses at the end of this contract negotiation, and so they're not going to get what they're worth, but they know what they're worth, and they're fighting to get closer to that.
Yeah. And this is about families. It's important to point out. I was on their page the night of the when they were in the late hours trying to negotiate a contract, and one of the wives down there said, I feel like, she posted it, I feel like I need to start a Venmo account because I don't know how we're going to feed our kids. And so these are the struggles of families, not because you say, well, then go back to work. Well, it's easy to go back to work until they keep taking and keep taking and keep taking, until, guess what? You're working 40 hours a week and you can't feed your kids. So go back to work is not the answer. So us supporting these workers is the answer. And if you're sitting there listening and you're saying, I'm 4 hours away, get in touch with us. Right. We will do everything we can to ensure. If you're in Hartselle and you say, I would like to donate to them, but I don't want to drive down, buy some water, call one of us, email one of us, we'll get it down to them.
And they I just talked to one of them. What is Larry's position in the union? Do you know? Is he like the president or the vice president? Spencer,
he's the vice president of District 20, which oversees all those.
Yeah, so I talked to him yesterday or this morning and asked him, it was this morning that I asked them if they had a strike fund, and they're working on that. They're going to get a strike fund up that people can donate to. So we will tell you as soon as we know that.
But it's easy to buy water.
It's easy to buy water.
And there's 1,100 workers down there that's on the picket line.
And you said they need metal drums for fires. Like, it's still cold at night sometimes. And they've got to man the picket lines 24 hours a day, right?
Yes, correct.
24 hours a day, there's got to be somebody out on that picket line, and it still gets pretty damn cold at night. So they need metal drums to make fires. If you've got any of those, if you're working in the construction industry.
Somebody told me about where some were at in Sheffield. I'm going to call them Monday. If they don't have any the drums yet, then we can get them. They're cheap. They were $15 for a metal drum. The problem is going to be
getting them down there.
I got a trailer, but God knows it's old. Right. So get in touch with us. We need to support these workers no matter what. And I can tell you, we were on strike on our last contract. I have no reason to doubt that we're not going to be on strike next year. I've got a lawnmower that's literally the wheels are falling off of it. And I told my wife the other week, we were looking at buying another lawnmower, and I'm like, I'm going to duct tape this lawnmower to pieces to get us through the next year because, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And, I told somebody about about those concessions that the company was asking for yesterday, and they were like, well, they're probably trying to keep them having a job. And I'm like, that's such baloney. Like, if they wanted to make sure, if it was out of the benevolence of the company, that they were asking for these concessions, the first thing they would do is to cut their own salaries and to say, okay,
not give $30,000 bonuses.
Yeah. That's just a bunch of horse crap. It's like, you got to, like, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating talking about coal miners going on strike because they have been asked to take a $15 an hour pay cut and to be told, well, the company's probably just trying to keep them having a job. What a bunch of just good grief. The propaganda that has wormed its way. Yeah, this is a good person. Like, I love this person. It's a good person, but just the propaganda that has wormed its way into their mind and contorted their vision of the world is just, it's sad. It's so sad. And, you know, and like David said about, oh, well, why do you go on if you're worried about not feeding their family? You know, people, they're going to be asking for donations for the strike fund so that they can continue to feed their families through this strike. Well, if you're worried about feeding your families, you should go back to work. That is, again, this pro-corporate boss propaganda has wormed its way into your mind. The reason that they are going on strike is because they want to feed their families, because they want to support their families, because they want to support their communities and make sure that their children and the people coming up after them have it better than they do, and at least have it the same as they do. And to say that if you're worried about going hungry, you should cross the picket line, become a scab, betray every single one of your brothers and sisters in your workplace, and undercut their fight for better wages and working conditions is so anti-worker.
I mean,
so anti-worker. Somebody else that I know was talking to me about somebody that they knew that crossed a picket line and said, well, he had 7 mouths to feed. And it's like, you don't think the union knows that? You don't think the union is going to do everything that they can to make sure those mouths are fed? And you don't think that the strike is that they're going on strike because everybody's got mouths to feed? Everybody's got to feed themselves in the union. Everybody's got to feed their families in the union. And just because you've got mouths to feed doesn't mean that you have the ability to undercut everybody else. The way that you continue to feed your families into the future is to stand with your brothers and sisters and against the exploitation of the boss, to make sure that you've got good wages and working conditions into the future with your brothers and sisters, not kowtowing to the boss and undercutting them.
Yeah. Tell them, Jacob. I mean, look, in plain English, what we've done for the last 40 years isn't sustainable. Mm-hmm. If you go back and look at any data from the 1970s, inflation has risen, corporate CEO pay has risen, workers' compensation has dropped. Mm-hmm. Inflation continues to rise, and yet you may think, well, I'm getting a 3% raise, but the problem is if inflation rises 5%, then you're going backwards. Mm-hmm. And we have negotiated against ourselves, and when I say we, I mean workers across the United States, have negotiated against ourselves saying, we'll continue taking less and less and less, and it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, what I can buy now, making the amount of money that I make is nowhere near what my father could make, you know, when he retired, making the amount of money that he was making. Right. And you look and you say, I can't, you know, we talk about it at work consistently. A lot of the guys at work, like, you know, these big Chevrolet pickup trucks, Ford pickup trucks, and everybody's saying, I cannot believe that a pickup truck is $60,000. Well, guess what? Mm-hmm. The reason that the pickup truck is $60,000 is because everybody is making money. It's raising the prices of the vehicles except for the worker. The workers are not keeping up with the cost of inflation. And if you continue saying we're just trying to keep everybody employed, being employed is a joke if you can't afford, a vehicle to drive, if you can't afford food to put on the table. So this is not sustainable what we're doing. We've got to change our mindset to recognize the value of your labor. And the value of your labor is what the company makes. Anything less than what the company makes, you are forfeiting a percentage of your value and giving it away for free.
Right.
For nothing.
Yeah, well, you're talking about that's exactly right, that workers are bargaining against themselves and fighting against themselves when they talk about this. And here's a hot take. Here's a hot take for you as we're going off the air.
Oh, we got about 3 minutes.
Union workers have never once asked for too much. That's what I believe. I do not believe that there is a single instance that you can point me towards where union workers in their contracts have asked for too much, that they have been unreasonable in their demands, that they have been the cause of and bargaining against yourselves is exactly what we're talking about when we hear, well, it's the workers' fault that these automotive plants have been shipped overseas. It's because they got too greedy. They wanted too much money. They wanted their workplaces to be too safe. They wanted to be able to have a comfortable life in retirement. They wanted to have good health care if they had a heart attack. Workers have never, all of their demands were completely reasonable, and they have never once asked for too much. UAW has have there been people at the top of unions? Have there been international presidents who have been corrupted and they have individually gotten greedy and they have taken advantage of their place in the union and been bribed by the corporations that they're supposed to be fighting against? Yes, that has happened. But have the workers, have the rank and file, have the demands of the union in contract negotiations ever been unreasonable or asked for too much? No. The answer to that is no.
And just to clarify, because I just looked over here at the comments, Jack said that Larry is the international vice president, so I apologize for
fancy.
That's pretty big.
International vice president.
And the leader of UMWA in Tennessee and North Carolina South. So, I wanted to clarify that because I definitely don't want to take anything away from him. He's been a strong fighter, and I see him every year at the AFL-CIO, and he's not only is he a strong fighter, he's a good Christian man and a very, very honorable person. So, talk anything about the miners, and we'll come to blows pretty quick over that stuff because they're salt of the earth type people.
Yeah. Workers have never asked for too much. Who has asked for too much? It's been the bosses every time. While you're talking about workers being greedy, asking for too much, asking for $60, $70, $80, even $100,000 a year, how much is the boss taking? The boss is taking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars a year. Who earns that money? It's the workers. The workers are the ones that create the value that the bosses take, and unions are the best way for workers to retain more of the value that they create for the company.
You can't have it both ways. You can't in one moment say that the exploitation in China and the slave labor in China and the Uyghurs and all of these people, you can't take up for them and simultaneously take up for a company that moves their work over there and exploits that labor.
Yeah, blame the workers for the company going over and exploiting slave labor. That's exactly right.
Buy American.
Yeah. Buy American, buy union made, buy our hats. They are both of those things at thevalleylaborreport.org. We will see you next week, and I'll be sending you some dispatches on Twitter today to let you know how my car goes and give you some updates from the picket line. See you next week.
WVNN Athens, WVNN FM Trinity, a Cumulus station. It's 11 o'clock. News starts now.
From ABC News, I'm Dave Pack.